Hey everybody, welcome back to Momentum Test Prep, and thanks for being here with us in the Desmos Graphing Calculator course. In this video, we're just going to give a few ways you can use Desmos, really kind of an overview of the Desmos Graphing Calculator. If you're not super familiar with it, it is a super helpful tool that's really going to help you improve your score on the math portion of the SAT. So first of all, if you're not familiar, Desmos is a digital graphing calculator, right? Think it will have some of the same functions that the physical handheld calculators, maybe like a TI-84 or some of the Casio ones you might have used in a math class before, but it is really just streamlined to be used in a digital environment, and it's perfect for a digital test like the digital SAT. So the first way you can find this, I'm in the app here for Desmos, but you can also just Google Desmos Graphing Calculator. You can even do SAT Desmos Graphing Calculator, and you'll see the College Board's version, which really isn't any different. It just doesn't allow you to upload anything the way this one is. So you see that little menu that just popped up there with images and things like that. You won't be able to do that on the SAT, of course, so that version wouldn't have it. But otherwise, function-wise, it is exactly the same, which is, again, just speaks to how powerful a tool this is for us on the digital SAT. So that's how you can find it. Again, just Google it. You can find it that way. If you're using Blue Book for a practice test, it will be embedded into the test, just like it will be on the actual day of the test. But let's go ahead and get into a few things that Desmos can do here. Again, this isn't going to be all-encompassing by any means. We'll have a series of other videos that will go into all of the things you can do with Desmos and the types of questions you can answer with those specific functions. But this, again, is just a little overview for you, okay? So the first thing I always like to remind students of, even though it has all these functions you see here at the bottom, you see the numbers like a normal calculator, you see variables, it can square, you see the inequality symbols, pi, square root, right? This functions button in the top right here can take us to all of these other functions, many of which we will talk about, some of which you will definitely not need for this test. But at the end of the day, this is still just a normal calculator. So if you find yourself needing to do a normal calculation, let's do a classic 2 plus 2 here, it will still tell you that it's 4, and you see that answer right there in the corner. All right, so this is still a normal calculator capable of doing normal calculations. Of course, it is also a graphing calculator, right? So you can plug in functions. Let's just do an easy linear function here, like 3x plus 2. And it will graph that function. It will show that function just like a graphing calculator would. It will assume that you're in the form of y equals. So you see I didn't even have to put in y equals when I typed in that function. There it is as just 3x plus 2. Again, y equals 3x plus 2 would sort of read and graph the same way. But it can graph. You can also identify points on that graph. So here I can see there's the y-intercept at 0, 2. And there's the x-intercept, which is about at negative 2/3, 0 there. All right, so an x and y intercept there. You can also slide for any point along the graph should you need a specific one there. So that's very helpful for this as well. If you were to see multiple equations on one graph, we call it a system, right? And we'll have a separate video on this, but let's say 2x plus 1, like that. You can not only find points on that graph as well, like you see right there, but you can also very much find the solution to that system, that point where those intersect or where they cross, right? In the case of these two functions, that is the point -1, -1. And we see both of them crossing there, all right? So systems are a really great way to use this one as well. What we can also do here is if you have, let's just say one function, so we take one of our functions off there, we can also see a table of points from a given function that we've put into the graphing calculator. So if you go to that little sort of spoke on a wheel looking emblem there, right? And you see I have it highlighted there. It looks like a little cog on a wheel. You can click it and then click that little table there on the left, and it'll bring up an entire table of values, okay? That's very helpful. Again, you can see all these different points that lie on this line, and we can see them all visibly here, all right? That's just 5 different points there. All right, so again, that's the little right there. Almost a little settings button, and then that little table that's next to the X. There we go, and I just made a second one for you. All right, so we duplicated the table. That's how we bring up a table for a function that we've typed into the calculator. You can also turn decimals, let's say 0.75 here. You can also turn decimals into fractions, which is really helpful. You just go to that little button on the side there of where we just typed it in, or you see the little square on top of another square. You can click that, and it will give you that decimal as a fraction. That's a great way to kind of understand, so you don't have to memorize what different decimals equate to in fraction form. Okay. There are also such a thing as sliders here. So Desmos inherently only will read x and y, like that. Those functions, again, think the normal variables you would see in a function. But what you can also do here is make sliders. So if you were to say, let's say x plus a, you can add a slider, and it's essentially just a placeholder for a given number, right? So you see here, if I have x plus a, and then we have a equals, let's say a is equal to 3, then really up there, x plus a is really just x plus 3, right? Which is why you see the line graphed there for y equals x plus 3. So don't be confused. Students a lot of times get kind of stressed out by sliders, but there's really no reason to be. There we go, and you see that one, right? So I added there, so we see the purple line there is x plus a. We know a is 3, which means x plus 3, or y equals x plus 3, is the same as that graph. And there it is graphed in red right over our initial line, just to prove to you that, again, those lines were the same. All right, so sliders can be really helpful in different contexts, right? Especially when you have a constant value assigned, and we define a constant value. Again, it's just a value that doesn't change, right? In this case, the constant was 3. A few other things that Desmos can do that are very, very helpful for us is they can also calculate mean, median, and standard deviation. So when you're taking this on a traditional computer, you can either go over to the functions button there and find them within statistics. You could click mean, let's say, right? And you have to make sure those values are separated by commas. But there you go. You can find the mean of numbers. You can also find, if we go back to statistics there, the median of a data set. All right, let's just do that for example. Okay, and then we can also do standard deviation, and it's right there next to those other ones as well. There's standard deviation. Again, with each of those items in a list being separated by a comma. Just make sure, there we go. And that's mean, median, and standard deviation. If you're on a computer and it's easier to just type those out, what you see there, you can totally do that. You can just type out the word mean and then start parentheses and do exactly as you see there. Same thing with median and standard deviation. Another really helpful thing that Desmos can do is it can find, for a set of numbers, it can find the greatest common factor, the GCF. So this can be really helpful when we're simplifying fractions, and it will find the greatest common factor. And you can also find it within here. See so many functions, again, many of which you won't need. Let's just do 100. 825. There we go. So for 100, 825 in this example, that GCF, or here the GCD, it would be 25, right? It's that number that they can all, the greatest common divisor is what we would really say there, is a number that all of them can be divided by, right? So that is that's the greatest number that all 3 of those numbers could be divided by. Again, this can be very helpful when trying to find common denominators for operations with fractions, should you need to do that. We can also do, in Desmos, we can do exponents, right? If we can take a number, we can square it using the square button, but we can also add a different exponent by clicking that A to the B button right there. If you're on a keyboard, it would be Shift and then 6 at the same time, and it's that little caret button, and it'll kind of take it into a superscript there, and then you can put in any, there we go, you could put in any exponent you'd like, and you see the graph changing there as we change the exponent. That's always a very helpful tool as well. All right. You can also graph inequalities here. So if you had x is greater than or equal to 3, and those buttons are all found there at the bottom, in that bottom left part that you see there. X is greater than or equal to 3, meaning x could be anything that is 3 or anything to the right of 3, right? Anything that is greater than 3, and you see that graphed there as well. So these can be very helpful for not only exponents, but also inequality questions as well. A last couple of formulas that can be very helpful, especially when we're dealing with circles, would be distance and midpoint. Again, you can get to these by typing out distance or typing out midpoint. You can also then come down here and find them down here as well within the functions button. And these are found in the geometry section here, but you would just do the distance. And then you would just do 2 points, both in parentheses. So let's say you wanted to find the distance between 2, 0, and then comma, and then 10, 0. Those are 8 away from each other, right? 8 units away from each other. We picked 2 that were kind of easy to see that, right? Just along the axis there. But those are 8 away from each other. And again, notice that the whole thing had to be in parentheses, and then each individual point had to be in parentheses, separated by a comma as well. And midpoint here would work very, very similar. We could just find it in the geometry section here of the functions button. Midpoint of 2 points would work the same way. Make sure that they're both in parentheses, separated by a comma. And the distance between those is 8, but their midpoint would be 6, 0. There we go. And you can even see that we can label it, right? We can label it right there, and it'll actually graph it on the graph for us if we click that little label button. All right. And the last way that we can use Desmos that we'll talk about in this video real quick is for percents. And this is really one that not a lot of students know, but we can use the Desmos calculator for percents. So let's say you needed to find 50% of 284, right? You could go 50, and then you could just go to, really on your calculator, you could do it here if you wanted to find it. If you were on a keyboard, you could just type in shift and then 5 for the percent button. We'll find it here at the bottom. So 50% of, what did I say, 284 would be 142, and it will give you that percent. So you type in the number, you just click the percent button on your keyboard or on the keyboard built into the calculator itself, and you can find percents easily like that. Now, of course, you may be saying, yes, of course, we could do decimal multiplication here as well, but if you don't like to convert between decimals and percents or percents and decimals, this can be a very straightforward way to do this, okay? So this is, again, a lot, but not all of the things that the Desmos graphing calculator can do and help you for this test. Just a little overview here for you. Hope you enjoyed the video. We'll see you next time for some more videos on how you can use the Desmos graphing calculator to answer questions on the digital SAT. But until then, keep the momentum building.